The jet coughed awake and shouldered into the night, lifting 100 strangers over the bruised glow of Newark and the black slick of the river. Somewhere in row 22, Ava Hart pressed her forehead to a chilled window and told herself not to cry. She had a diner's coffee burned into her bloodstream, ammonia cracked into her knuckles, and a backpack with a broken zipper chewing on the last of her pay. 2 days with no real sleep. 2 jobs and not enough rent. The math had stopped being math and turned into weather, something that just happened to her. She didn't notice the man in 22C at first. She noticed the space around him, how it seemed to behave. Flight attendants lowered their voices near his elbow. A guy in a suit glanced once and then looked away too quickly. The cabin smelled like recycled air and citrus wipes. Near him it smelled like cedar, clean steel, winter. Ava told herself to face the window and be invisible. That was a skill. When people didn't see you, they didn't expect anything. When they didn't expect anything, you couldn't fail them. The wing lamps winked. The hum deepened into a lullaby with teeth. Exhaustion climbed her bones rung by rung. Don't sleep, she ordered herself. If she slept, she'd miss the shuttle in Vegas. If she missed the shuttle, she'd miss the orientation. If she missed the orientation, she'd lose the temp assignment that might keep the lights on another week. She dug her nails into her palm. 5 minutes later, sleep took her anyway, the kind that doesn't ask. When her head tipped, she expected plastic. She found a shoulder. It wasn't an accident the way some accidents are messy. It was accepted, the quiet way doorways accept you when you lean against them. The shoulder had heat. It had a steadiness that felt like leaning against a locked safe. Ava snapped awake hard enough to bite her tongue. "Sorry," she whispered, startled by her voice. Sorry." She tried to pull back, to reassemble herself into a shape that didn't touch anyone. An arm adjusted. Subtle, decisive, not trapping, allowing. "It's fine," the man said without looking at her. His voice was low and unhurried, the kind people use when everything else in the room belongs to them. "Get some sleep." She didn't. Not immediately. The body remembers danger even when the mind is fog. She glanced up because curiosity is a soft rebellion. The man was maybe mid-30s, clean line of jaw, hair too neat to be an accident, suit too quiet to be cheap. He wasn't beautiful so much as inevitable. His gaze was on the safety card as if reading it mattered. The edges of a watch caught the cabin light, not flashy, engineered. She told herself to face the window. She told herself he was nobody. Then the engines droned deeper, and the space around him kept being the only place on the plane that felt like gravity worked, and her eyes closed because bodies make choices the mind negotiates later. Behind them, a man in a Navy windbreaker took 2 photos with his phone. No flash, no fuss. And slid a thin envelope into the aisle, deft as a magician. The envelope met a waiting hand. The waiting hand belonged to Dominic Santoro. He did not look at the envelope. He did not look at the girl sleeping against his shoulder. He watched the condensation gather and vanish on the window and counted minutes because precision kept knives out of his back. When he reached 30, he let his eyes close and let the world pretend he slept. He knew who she was. Ava Benedetti on paper once, Ava Hart in cheap ink now. The last ember of a family Chicago swore was cold. A name that made old men in dark rooms pour another drink and lie to themselves. The pilot dimmed the cabin to dusk. The plane shouldered the country. Ava slept deeper. Dominic held still because monsters are loud and hunters are quiet, and he had always refused to be the first and excelled at being the second. She murmured into his sleeve, and for a beat, he almost smiled. Weakness, he warned himself. Not kindness, not mercy, strategy with teeth. Keep the ember where the wind can't find it. Keep the ember where he could. Hours collapsed strange at 30,000 feet. When the wheels hammered the Vegas runway, Ava jerked awake, mortified, and scooted upright so fast the armrest squealed. I didn't mean, it's fine, he said again, already unbuckling. His eyes found hers for the first time properly. They were dark, the way depth is dark. Safe landing. She nodded, small, like the gesture belonged to someone else. The universe shifted back into ordinary, the aisle clogged with people standing wrong. Overhead bins yawned like mouths. Ava shouldered her tired backpack and became invisible again. Dominic waited as if he had nowhere urgent to be and let two businessmen spill ahead. He did not touch her. He did not need to. The plan would. Vegas at midnight is a lie that tells itself well. The airport smelled like sugar and carpet. Ava followed signs and a canceling bank balance to a shuttle she hoped she could still catch. A woman in a blazer stopped her with a smile that had too many teeth. "Ms. Hart? You dropped this at security." She held out a clipboard and a pen. Ava blinked. "I didn't? Just the standard travel waiver from your employer. HR pinged us. If we don't attach the form, the shuttle won't seat. You'll lose the shift." The words stacked into a wall labeled consequences. Ava signed without fully seeing. Habit learned at closing time. Perfect. Shuttle 3, out those doors. The woman vanished into the crowd as if she'd never been, which is a thing that happens when you are looking the other way. The shuttle didn't come. Ava waited 20, then 40, then surrendered her last decent dollars to a rideshare with a suspicious trunk smell. She texted the number on her temp email. It bounced. Neon washed the windows like cheap absolution. By the time the car slid to a curb under a porte cochere, her eyelids rasped like grit paper. "This isn't my—" she started. "Penthouse check-ins are through that door," the driver said, already reading another fare. I think, there's a motel." But the door had a doorman, and the doorman had her name. "Ms. Hart, welcome." That was how she walked across a lobby of stone and light and into an elevator that didn't make a sound. That was how she stopped belonging to her life without noticing precisely when. The suite door opened on a click. A room the size of her building inhaled her without effort. Glass and leather, a skyline with teeth. On a marble table, a silver bucket sweating, 2 flutes asleep, a folder with her name in clean black type. Her heart did the small animal thing. It tried to outrun the cage inside the cage. She told herself to leave. The elevator would still be there. But the folder was a siren dressed like paperwork. She lifted the cover with hands that had learned to be brave in smaller tragedies. Photographs slid into her lap, her in white. A haze veil. A cheap chapel with gold pretending to be gold. A man at her side, profile severe. The angle wasn't kind, but it didn't need to be. It needed to be clear. Her signature. Twice. Once on a certificate. Once on something that looked official enough to decide a life. Ava's mouth went dry. No. The door whispered and then didn't whisper because the sound inside her went louder. The man from 22C stepped in like he'd rented the air. The suit had not wrinkled. The watch had not moved. He looked at her as if the ocean sometimes looked at rocks. "You're awake," he said, and the voice made a different kind of gravity. "Good." She stood. The photographs trembled against her fingers, a paper animal shaking. "These are fake." "They're true," he answered, crossing to the table and tapping a page with 2 fingers. The gesture was intimate, like some men are with piano keys. The kind of truth that sticks. "I wasn't there," Ava said. "That woman isn't—" "You were on the plane," he said mildly. "You signed the travel waiver. You consented to witnesses, photo capture, representation, and ceremony stand-in if you were incapacitated. Midnight clause." "That's not real," she said. "Those aren't real things." "In your world, maybe." He finally let his gaze settle on her hand where it strangled the certificate. "In mine, perception is the law until someone with more perception says otherwise." She wanted to throw the papers at him. She wanted to throw a chair out the glass and watch Neon bleed. She wanted to be a person for whom things like this did not happen. "Who are you?" she asked, because names are doors. Dominic Santoro. He watched the name hit her without meaning. It would mean more later. Names always do. "I'm calling the police," Ava said. Her voice found its spine. "This is... I don't even know what crime it is, but it's..." Loud. he supplied softly. Loud never helped anyone like you. People like me? The kind who get used for other people's headlines, he said. And for a second, something colder than arrogance moved behind his eyes. You'll tell them what? You fell asleep on a plane and woke up married in a penthouse? You signed forms you didn't read, stood in a chapel you don't remember, and now you're not sure whether you want the check or the annulment. They won't believe you. They'll enjoy you. Her face burned. I didn't stand in any chapel. You don't remember standing, he corrected. Your representation did. She stared at the photos until they doubled. The veil, the ring on a hand that looked like hers wearing someone else's life, the way the officiant's mouth made O like a sticker. What do you want? She asked, because at the end of smaller tragedies there is always a price, and knowing the number is sometimes a kind of mercy. He considered the window. To keep you alive. The room found a new temperature. What? You have a last name you don't use, he said. It's a spark near oil. He turned back to her, and the distance vanished like a magician's scarf. The Morellis and what's left of Caruso would sell continents to touch it. They won't touch it if it's mine. Her laugh came wrong. So your plan for protecting me is owning me. My plan is controlling the story before someone else writes you out of it, he said. The wedding is the story. The paperwork is the story. The flight photos are the story. You and I can spend the next year fighting over footnotes, or we can get on a plane to New York in the morning. You think you can keep me? Her throat hurt, but the word keep didn't sound as weak as she feared it would. I think you'll be safer at my side than anywhere else you can imagine, he said. And I have a better imagination than most. Ava put the photos back in the folder. She did it carefully because careful is what you do when control is an artifact on a table. She slid past him and found the balcony doors because air sometimes pretends to be freedom. Las Vegas glittered like a dare. Down there, people made decisions they called destiny. Up here, someone else made hers. Behind her, Dominic said, "Car leaves at 6. She didn't answer. The glass reflected a man who could be kind if kindness were a tactic. It reflected a girl with a name she had misplaced. Invisible girls survive by knowing what matters now. Now was a night with a lock on it, and a stranger who thought the world was a set you could rebuild if you knew where the screws went. Ava pressed her palm to the cold glass and promised herself 2 things. She would not cry in front of him, and she would find the seam in this story where she could pull. In the city below, a chapel clerk counted cash. A judge signed a thing he didn't read, and a man in a windbreaker deleted photos from his phone that would never really be gone. At the table, the silver bucket sweated, forgotten. The folder did not sweat. Paper never does. It just waits. And when dawn hit the glass in a straight, honest line, the car would be there, because when men like Dominic said 6, the world put a car at a door. Ava didn't sleep. He did, perhaps. Or he practiced being still with his eyes closed, which in some lives is the same thing. Somewhere over the strip, a billboard decided the night had been a success. The morning would disagree. The curtains had been drawn shut while she stood staring at the skyline, but Ava could still feel Vegas humming through the glass like static. Neon was an animal out there, hungry, dazzling, unashamed. In here, the air was too still, too expensive, as if someone had bottled silence and sold it by the ounce. The folder sat on the table like a verdict. She hadn't touched it again, but she could still see the photographs when she closed her eyes. Her in a veil, her signature looped like wire on a certificate. Her standing beside him, Dominic Santoro, as though she had chosen it. The sound of the suite's door opening pulled her back. He moved inside without hurry, without announcing himself. Men who owned the air didn't need to. Ava clutched the sheet of paper in her hands and snapped, "These are fake." Dominic didn't answer right away. He poured himself a glass of water as though they were having an ordinary conversation at an ordinary hour. Only when he'd taken a slow sip did his gaze lift to hers. "They're true enough," he said. "True enough?" Her laugh cracked into something sharp. "I never stood in any chapel. I never said any vows. Whoever she is in those pictures, it's not me." He came closer, not with aggression, but with inevitability. It doesn't matter what you remember. It matters what they see. Every man I do business with will believe those photos. Every rival will believe those signatures. And if they believe it, then it's real. Her skin prickled. That's fraud. That's insanity. In your world, he said, his tone even, almost kind. In mine, perception is power. Power is law. And law is just another costume. Ava shook her head violently. You can't keep me here. I'll call the police, the FBI. Someone will believe me. He smiled then, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. And what story will you tell them, Ava Hart? That you fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder and woke up married to him? That your own signature proves you stood in front of a judge, said the words, signed the paper? Do you know what they'll see? His voice lowered, rough velvet over steel. They'll see a girl who regrets her choices, who wants to escape a bad marriage she walked into with her own pen. They won't believe you. They'll laugh at you. And the people who do believe, they'll want to use you. Her throat tightened until the words nearly strangled themselves. Use me for what? For the first time, Dominic's eyes softened, though the softness was more dangerous than his steel. Because of your name. I don't. You will, he interrupted, quiet, but absolute. Soon enough. Ava's hands trembled as she set the paper back on the table, as though distance could make the truth less sharp. Her heart beat against her ribs, furious at its own betrayal. What do you want from me? She demanded. I want you alive. The words landed wrong, like a gift wrapped in barbed wire. She stared at him, trying to find cracks in his certainty, a seam to pull until the whole illusion unraveled. You don't even know me. Dominic studied her face with unsettling patience. I know enough. And I know this. If the Morellis or the Carusos get to you first, you won't live long enough to argue over photographs. The names meant nothing to her, but the way he spoke them chilled her blood. Stop talking in riddles, she hissed. You think you can just claim me? Parade me in front of whoever these people are and call it protection? He leaned closer, his voice dropping until she could feel the weight of it against her skin. It isn't a parade if the alternative is your funeral. Her fury surged hot enough to burn through the fear. She shoved the folder against his chest. Then I'll take my chances. For the first time, Dominic's composure wavered, just slightly, a flicker like a shadow passing over glass. He caught the folder in one hand, his grip tightening until the pages bent. You don't understand yet, he said softly, almost regretfully. But you will. Tomorrow morning we fly east. By the time we land, there won't be a person alive who doubts what you are to me. Mrs. Santoro. The title struck her like a slap. Her pulse thundered in her ears. I'll run, she whispered. I don't care what you've staged, I'll find a way. Dominic's gaze locked on hers, steady and merciless. You can try. The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Sleep never came. Ava sat in the dark suite, arms wrapped around herself, watching the neon pulse beyond the balcony doors. She thought of the girl she'd been just 2 days ago, scraping tips into a jar, laughing with Maya over burnt toast, promising herself tomorrow would be lighter. That girl was gone, erased by photographs she hadn't lived and signatures she hadn't written. By dawn her body ached, not from exhaustion alone, but from the heavy weight of a truth she couldn't outrun. In Dominic Santoro's world, her word meant nothing. And yet, when the car appeared at 6 sharp as he promised, she climbed inside. Because refusing him wasn't the same as escape. Because sometimes survival looks like surrender. The jet lifted east, and Ava stared out at the desert shrinking below. Across from her, Dominic read documents in silence, as if she weren't even there. The silence pressed against her lungs until she could barely breathe. She clenched her fists in her lap and whispered to herself, unheard, I will find the seam. I will pull until the whole thing tears apart. But deep down, a darker whisper answered, what if there isn't one? The car wound up the long drive in silence. Beyond the tinted glass, acres of manicured lawn unfurled like a private kingdom. Iron gates had swallowed them miles back, and now marble statues and trimmed hedges stood like watchmen, too pristine to belong to any ordinary life. Ava pressed her forehead to the window. The estate rose before her, massive and pale against the Hudson River's gray horizon. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. Balconies dripped with ivy, windows glared like watchful eyes, and men in black suits stood at intervals along the stone walls. The car slowed beneath an arched portico. A butler type opened her door as though she belonged here. Ava stepped out on shaking legs, the weight of the mansion pressing down before she had even crossed its threshold. Inside, polished wood gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of roses and old wealth. Servants moved with bowed heads, careful not to look directly at her, though she could feel their eyes flicker in quick, assessing glances. Curiosity, pity, fear. "This is your home now," Dominic said beside her, his voice low, measured. Ava spun on him, fury burning away the awe. A gilded cage is still a cage. His mouth curved faintly, though his eyes remained hard. Better gilded than buried. By nightfall, Dominic led her into a chamber that smelled of cigars and ambition. A long mahogany table stretched the length of the room, surrounded by men in suits whose faces bore the wear of violence and victory. Every eye turned when Dominic entered with Ava at his side. She hesitated in the doorway, her stomach tightening under the weight of their stares. Dominic's hand pressed lightly against her back, a guiding touch that was also a warning. He walked her forward, then placed his hand lower on her spine, signaling possession with a gesture subtle enough to be missed but impossible to mistake. "This is my wife," Dominic said, his voice steady as stone. "Ava Santoro." The name landed like a spark in dry timber. A murmur rippled through the table. Surprise, suspicion, envy. Some men exchanged sharp looks, others allowed smirks to slip. One older capo, Carlo Rossi, leaned back in his chair, smoke curling from his cigar. "Married in Las Vegas, was it? Quick work, Dominic." His tone held both curiosity and challenge. "The best decisions are made quickly," Dominic replied, "before anyone else has the chance to interfere." Another capo, younger, raised his glass. "A lovely bride, though fragile. You'll need to guard her well." His eyes lingered on Ava too long. Dominic's expression didn't change, but the air around him hardened. "She is guarded," he said flatly. "Anyone who doubts that is welcome to test it." The table went silent. Ava's chest tightened. Rage simmered at the way he used her presence like a declaration, a trophy. She wanted to scream at him, to tell every man in that room she wasn't his to parade. But his hand pressed at her back again, firm, commanding. Not now. Later that evening, the mansion's grand hall opened into a glittering ballroom. Chandeliers rained light over marble floors, and the air buzzed with the hum of strings and polite conversation. Politicians, businessmen, and criminals mingled as if they were all the same species. Ava felt small in the silk dress that had appeared in her closet, chosen by someone else, in her size, as though every part of her life had been calculated. She held her chin high anyway, determined not to let them see fear. And then he appeared. Luca Morelli. He moved through the crowd with effortless charm, his smile warm, his suit immaculate. When he reached them, he bowed slightly to Dominic, but his gaze lingered on Ava. "Signore Santoro," he said smoothly. Then, turning to her, "And this must be your new bride." "Ava, is it? A beautiful name." Heat rushed into her cheeks before she could stop it. She extended her hand out of habit, and Luca took it, bowing just enough for his lips to brush her knuckles. His eyes never left hers, dark with amusement, as though he knew exactly how dangerous the gesture was. Beside her, Dominic's body went rigid, though his face remained stone. Only his grip on his wineglass, tight enough to threaten the stem, betrayed the storm brewing. "Pleasure," Ava said quickly, snatching her hand back. Luca's smile widened. "The pleasure is mine. If you ever need a friend in this world, someone to help you navigate." His words trailed, deliberate, an implication sharpened like a blade. Before Ava could respond, Dominic's hand settled firmly on her knee beneath the table. Possessive, silencing. His voice cut smooth and cold. "My wife requires nothing from anyone outside this family," he said. "She is well cared for." Luca inclined his head, mock respect dripping from the gesture. "Of course. Still, the offer stands." The rest of the evening passed in brittle silence. Ava caught between Dominic's smoldering fury and Luca's infuriating charm. By the time the last toast ended, she felt raw, frayed, her pulse still trembling from the weight of two men's war written across her skin. When Dominic guided her out with a hand at the small of her back, his touch was sharper than protection. It was ownership. And as the ballroom doors closed behind them, Ava realized with a twist of dread that whatever cage she had fallen into was no longer just Dominic's. Another man had already found the keyhole. The Hudson estate slept in silence, the kind that smothered rather than soothed. Ava lay awake in a bed too large, staring at velvet drapes that seemed to breathe with her fear. Dominic's words replayed in her mind. Perception is power, better gilded than buried. She couldn't breathe. The dress in the closet, the jewelry in velvet boxes, the servants who lowered their eyes as if she were royalty. It wasn't safety. It was a stage. And she was the unwilling actress. Her pulse pounded as she slipped from the bed, bare feet meeting the cold marble floor. She pulled on a coat that wasn't hers, the fabric heavy, the pockets deep. The halls beyond her door stretched wide and silent, lit only by pools of golden lamplight. She moved carefully, hugging the walls, her breath caught in her chest. She had memorized the estate from glimpses and shadows. She knew where the guards stood, where the side entrance faced the tree line, where the iron gates yawned beyond. Every step was a prayer for freedom. The latch was colder than she expected, iron biting her palm. She fumbled with it, her hands trembling, when a voice slid out of the darkness. "Leaving so soon?" Her blood froze. Luca Morelli stepped from the shadows, his tie loosened, his jacket unbuttoned. His smile gleamed faintly in the low light, easy and dangerous. Ava pressed her back to the wall. What are you doing here?" He shrugged lightly. "A house like this is never truly locked to men who know where to knock." She swallowed hard, clutching the latch. "I'm not staying here. I can't." "Of course you can't." He took a slow step closer, his voice velvet over steel. "Santoro doesn't cage women. He cages property. And you—" His eyes flicked over her, deliberate, claiming, "are much too alive to belong behind his walls." Her chest heaved. "Then help me." The smile sharpened. "That's exactly what I came to offer." He leaned against the door frame, casual, as though this were a conversation over wine instead of a negotiation over chains. "I can get you out," Luca said. "Papers can be burned, witnesses silenced. A marriage undone is nothing in Las Vegas if you have the right money, the right men. And I have both." Ava's breath caught. For a flicker of a moment, hope sparked, an exit sign glowing in the dark. But when she met his gaze, the spark died. His eyes weren't protective, they were hungry. Not for her, but for what she represented. A pawn to wound Dominic, a weapon to shatter his empire. "You don't care about me," she whispered. He chuckled softly. "Care? No, Ava. I care about balance, and Santoro has tipped the scales too long. With you I can reset them." The realization struck her harder than any lock could. This wasn't escape. It was a trade. One cage for another. "I'll find my own way," she said, her voice trembling but steady. She stepped back, but his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His smile thinned, venomous now. "Don't be foolish," Luca murmured. "He'll destroy you. I'll at least let you live while I take everything else." Ava yanked free, her pulse a drumbeat of terror. "I'd rather take my chances with him than be your prize." For the first time, Luca's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Then, as quickly as it slipped, the charm returned. "Brave girl," he said softly, stepping back into the shadows. "I wonder how long that bravery lasts." And just like that, he was gone. Ava's knees threatened to give way, but she forced herself upright. The latch still rested under her palm. The night beyond still called to her. But the truth Luca had left in his wake was undeniable. Freedom wasn't safety. The world outside Dominic's cage had sharper teeth. With a shuddering breath, she closed the door. She crept back through the gilded halls, her steps uneven now, her chest aching with confusion. She hated Dominic for the cage. She hated Luca for the lie. And worst of all, she hated herself for the thought that had crept unbidden, traitorous and raw. If I had to choose, at least Dominic had kept me alive. When she finally collapsed against her bedroom door, the weight of her near mistake pressed down hard enough to steal her breath. Maybe she was doomed either way. But one truth cut sharper than the rest. If she had to fight, she would rather fight the devil she already knew. The glass shattered before Ava could scream. Masked men stormed through her balcony doors, shadows with knives and fists. One lunged, gloved hand clamping over her mouth. She kicked, thrashed, but his grip was iron. "Quiet," he hissed in accented English, "or we break you before we deliver you." Terror jolted through her veins, hot and merciless. She clawed at his arm, the taste of leather and smoke choking her lungs. Rope bit into her wrists, binding them tight as they dragged her across the floor. The night smelled of gunpowder. Somewhere in the distance, guards had fallen silent. This isn't a nightmare. It's real. They shoved her into a van, the cold metal floor bruising her knees as the engine roared. Every jolt threw her against steel, her wrists burned raw against the ropes. "What do you want from me?" she choked out. The man across from her pulled his mask low enough to grin. Your leverage. Caruso will pay dearly to see Santoro crawl." The name sliced through her. Dominic's world, Dominic's enemies. She wasn't just a pawn anymore. She was a weapon. Hours blurred together until the van screeched to a halt. Rough hands yanked her out into the stench of rust and gasoline. An abandoned warehouse loomed, windows black, air damp with mold. They tied her to a chair, the ropes cutting deeper into her skin. The door creaked open. Luca Morelli walked in. No mask, no shame. "Hello, Ava," he said smoothly, crouching to meet her terrified gaze. "You look frightened." "Don't be. You're safe now." Her throat closed around the words. "Safe? You're with them." "I warned you," Luca said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Santoro doesn't deserve you. With me, you'll have freedom. With me, you'll live." Tears burned her eyes as she jerked away. "You don't care about me. You just want to use me to destroy him." His smile curved sharper. "Perhaps. But if you're clever, you can survive this. Align with me, Ava. Be the reason Dominic falls, and I'll make sure you live to see it." Revulsion twisted in her gut. I'd rather die than betray him. For the first time, Luca's smile faltered. His voice dropped to a hiss. "Careful. Vincenzo may have chained you, but I can break you." Her pulse thundered, fear clawing through every nerve. But she lifted her chin anyway. "Then do it. I'm still not yours." Gunfire cracked through the night. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Shouts, bullets, bodies falling. Ava's scream tore from her throat as Caruso soldiers scrambled, some dropping under precise, merciless shots. And then she saw him. Dominic. He moved through the gunfire like a blade through water. Silent. Efficient. Rage controlled by precision. Luca spun toward her, fury twisting his features. "Vincenzo?" The name barely left his lips before Dominic fired. The bullet grazed Luca's shoulder, spinning him back. He cursed, retreating into the shadows as his men dragged him out. Coward. Another time. Dominic would finish it another time. The last Caruso soldier fell, blood pooling on the concrete. Silence slammed down heavy and terrible. Dominic crossed the floor, ripping the ropes from her wrists. The moment she was free, Ava collapsed against him, trembling, sobs tearing from her chest. He wrapped his arms around her, crushing her to him, his voice raw against her hair. "It's over. You're safe. I've got you." She shook her head, words fractured by tears. "I thought you wouldn't come. I thought—" He cupped her face, forcing her eyes to meet his. "Never. Do you understand me? Never." I would tear this city apart stone by stone before I let them keep you. Her eyes searched his, wide and shining with something more than fear. He didn't wait. He couldn't. His mouth crashed onto hers, desperate, brutal, alive. Ava stiffened for a heartbeat, then melted, arms clinging to him as though he were the only solid thing left in the world. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was survival. Rage and relief, fury and fire. Every ounce of him poured into her as if he could brand her with safety. When he pulled back, her lips were swollen, her breath uneven, her forehead pressed to his. "You're insane," she whispered. "Then I'll die insane," he said fiercely. "But I'll die with your name on my lips." He lifted her into his arms, carrying her out of the warehouse, stepping over the corpses of men who had dared touch what was his. His men cleared the path, but Dominic barely saw them. All he saw was her. Her face buried against him, her tears soaking his shirt, her survival. And for the first time in his life, Dominic Santoro feared, not death, not enemies, but the thought of losing her. The sun had not yet burned the mist from the Hudson when the convoy of black cars pulled back through the gates. Ava sat pressed against the far corner of the leather seat, her wrists bandaged, her throat raw from screams she hadn't meant to release. She had scrubbed at her tears until her skin felt raw, but still the salt clung to her. Through the tinted window she saw the estate rising again, that fortress of pale stone and ivy. Last night it had seemed like a gilded cage. Now, after the warehouse and the men who bound her, it felt like the final page of a nightmare, inevitable, inescapable. Dominic sat across from her, silent. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt collar open, streaked with another man's blood. He looked less like a polished kingpin and more like the thing whispered about in shadows, a predator wrapped in skin. His eyes stayed fixed on her, unblinking, steady. She refused to meet them. The car slowed beneath the archway. A servant rushed forward, opening the door with the same ceremony as before, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't been dragged through broken glass and nearly sold as leverage. Ava's legs trembled when she stepped out. The marble steps blurred beneath her vision, but Dominic's hand closed around hers, steady, certain. His grip wasn't crushing, but it allowed no refusal. She hated that part of her, leaned into it. The butler guided them to the heart of the house, to a study lined with shelves of leather-bound books and maps of territories that stretched farther than she could imagine. The fire had been stoked to a steady glow, its warmth clashing with the ice between them. Dominic shut the door. The thud reverberated through her ribs like a gavel striking judgment. He didn't sit. He paced, his movements taut, controlled only by willpower. His jaw was locked, his fists clenching and unclenching as if he were still strangling ghosts from the warehouse. "I should have killed him," he growled finally, his voice low and vibrating with fury. "Luca, Caruso, every last man in that building. I should have ended it last night." Ava sat stiffly in the armchair by the fire. Her body ached, exhaustion dragging at her, but anger burned hot enough to hold her upright. "You didn't," she said. Her voice cracked but didn't waver. "Because you wanted me back, more than you wanted revenge." He stopped pacing, turned. The firelight caught the sharp edges of his face. His eyes were darker than she had ever seen them, darker even than in the ballroom when Luca dared to touch her. "Yes." The single word cracked the air between them. "Yes, because nothing matters more than you." Her chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. "Why?" she demanded. "Why me? Why trap me in this life I never asked for?" For the first time Dominic's mask slipped. He looked almost human, haunted, stripped raw. "Because you're not just anyone, Ava. You're Hart blood, the last daughter of Samuel Hart." The name meant nothing to her, and yet it sounded heavy, carved out of stone and blood. She frowned. "Who?" "Your father," Dominic said, stepping closer. "Samuel Hart built half this city in the shadows. He disappeared before you could remember him, but his enemies never forgot. Every family believed the Hart bloodline was gone. But you—" His voice roughened. You're the last piece, the last heir, and every rival would burn the world to own you. Her pulse thundered. Her mother's evasive answers, the years of silence, the holes in her own history, suddenly they weren't accidents. They were cover. You knew, she whispered, horror clawing through her. You knew who I was all along. That's why you sat beside me on that plane. That's why you did all of this. Yes. His voice carried no hesitation, only truth as sharp as a blade. I orchestrated everything. The flight, the witnesses, the signatures. Every thread in the web that binds you to me, I spun it. Because if I didn't claim you, someone else would. And I couldn't allow that. Her tears blurred the room. She pressed her fists against her knees, nails digging into skin. You stole my life. Dominic's body moved before thought, dropping to one knee in front of her. His hand reached for hers, trembling as if it betrayed him. I saved it. She yanked back, but he caught her wrist, not with force, but with gentleness so at odds with the man who had painted walls with blood hours earlier. His thumb brushed the tender skin where the ropes had cut her, as if that small mercy might undo everything else. You think I don't know what I did? He said, voice hoarse, desperate. You think I don't know it was cruel? But I would rather chain you to me than bury you because of them. I can live with your hatred, Ava. I cannot live with your absence. Her chest heaved, fury and sorrow tangling until she couldn't tell them apart. You don't love me, she spat. You love control. You love winning. I was just another conquest. His gaze locked on hers, fire and pain colliding. No, he said fiercely. You're the only thing I've ever feared losing. That is not conquest. That is devotion. The words hit her like an open wound. She staggered to her feet, turning away before he could see her tears spill again. I can't forgive you, she whispered. Not for this, not now. Behind her, he didn't rise. He stayed kneeling, looking at her as though she were both salvation and executioner. Then hate me, Dominic said, his voice breaking. But stay, that's all I ask. Her breath shuddered out, torn between rage and something she refused to name. She pushed past him, fumbling for the door, and slammed it behind her. The echo rattled through her bones. The study felt colder without her. Dominic dragged both hands through his hair, pacing to the window that overlooked the river. His empire stretched beyond those walls. Territories, shipments, allies bought and sold. But none of it felt like enough. For years he had commanded men, faced bullets, carved his name into fear itself. But now, for the first time, he knew terror. Not of enemies, not of war, but of her walking away, even if only in her heart. He gripped the windowsill until his knuckles blanched. Through the glass, the river shimmered with dawn light, indifferent to his war. He had bent this world to his will, forced kings and killers to bow, but he couldn't force Ava's heart, and the possibility of losing her unmade him more than any blade ever could. Back in her room, Ava collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. Her wrists still burned from the ropes. Her lips still tingled from the kiss she swore she hadn't wanted in that warehouse. She hated him. God, she hated him. And yet, the memory of his voice in the dark whispered through her. Never. I would tear this city apart stone by stone before I let them keep you. Her heart stuttered, traitorous, because for all his lies, for all his manipulations, Dominic had come. He had found her when no one else would have. He had bled for her, killed for her. And she hated herself most of all for craving the one man who had stolen everything from her. She lay back on the silk sheets, whispering into the emptiness. I won't break. I won't. But deep down, she already feared she had. The estate should have felt safer after the rescue. Guards doubled at every entrance, cameras scanning every corridor, cars patrolling the grounds day and night. But to Ava, the silence was suffocating. Days passed where the sunlight slanted across the marble floors, warm and golden, but she never felt it. Every luxury that surrounded her, velvet drapes, perfumes arranged in crystal, Gowns that fit as though tailored to her very skin only reminded her of chains. She kept replaying Dominic's words in the study. Then hate me, but stay. And the worst part was that she had stayed. That evening, Dominic summoned her to the grand hall. The long tables stretched beneath chandeliers, servants gliding silently between courses. At first, it was only them, Dominic at the head, Ava at his right. She toyed with her glass of wine, refusing to eat. He watched her, his expression unreadable, though his hand drummed lightly on the table, betraying the storm beneath. "You haven't eaten in days," he said finally, his tone more command than concern. "I'm not hungry. You need strength. What I need," she snapped, "is freedom." The words cracked through the room, louder than the violin music drifting from the balcony. For a moment, she thought she saw pain flicker across his face, but it hardened instantly, replaced by steel. Before he could answer, the doors opened. Luca Morelli entered. He moved with the kind of grace that made men forget to breathe. His suit was immaculate, his smile polished to perfection, but his eyes glinted sharp and mocking as they landed on Dominic, and then softened, almost warmly, when they slid to Ava. "Apologies for my lateness," Luca said smoothly, as if he were an honored guest instead of an enemy walking into a lion's den. Dominic's jaw tightened. "You weren't invited." "Then consider me a surprise." Luca pulled out a chair across from Ava and sat without waiting for permission. He poured himself a glass of wine, swirling it lazily. Ava's pulse stuttered. She could feel Dominic's fury radiating beside her, sharp enough to slice. Luca tilted his glass in her direction. It must be overwhelming, stepping into this world so suddenly. "If you ever need a friend, Ava, someone less suffocating than our host here, you need only ask." Her breath caught. The air around her thickened. She opened her mouth, desperate to protest, to cut off the implication. But Dominic moved first. His hand slid beneath the table, gripping her knee firmly, possessively. His voice cut through the room like ice. "My wife requires nothing from anyone outside this family," he said. "She is well cared for." Luca smirked, sipping his wine. "Of course, still, the offer stands." Dinner dragged on, brittle and heavy. Every time Ava lifted her glass, she felt Dominic's gaze burning. Every time Luca's eyes lingered on her, her skin prickled with the weight of unspoken war. By the time the final course was cleared, her nerves were stretched thin as glass. Dominic rose, extending his hand to her. His voice was velvet, but his eyes were iron. "Come." Ava hesitated but took it. His grip was strong, pulling her up, guiding her out of the hall. Behind them, Luca leaned back in his chair, his smile widening as though he had won something neither of them could yet see. The heavy doors shut behind them. Dominic didn't release her hand. In fact, he pulled her sharply into the shadow of the corridor, his eyes blazing. "Do not look at him again," he said, his voice low but vibrating with fury. Ava jerked her hand free. "I didn't." "He touched you once before. He dared put his mouth on your skin. He'll not do it again." She shoved at his chest, her anger rising to match his. "I didn't do anything. He was polite." "Polite?" Dominic hissed, stepping closer until his chest brushed hers. "He was baiting me, using you to provoke me. And you—" His voice broke off, his jaw tightening as if the words cost him. "You don't understand the danger he brings." Her pulse pounded. She hated his possessiveness, his fury. She hated the way her body trembled beneath it. "You don't own me," she whispered, her voice shaking. His hand rose, bracing against the wall beside her head, his body caging hers in. His breath was hot against her skin. "No," Dominic said softly, his eyes burning into hers. "But I will." The words should have terrified her. Maybe they did. But her lips parted, trembling, as if some traitorous part of her wanted him closer. For a heartbeat, the air between them thickened, humming with a pull she couldn't deny. Then she shoved him hard, breaking the cage. "You're insane." He didn't step back. He only smiled, a wolf's smile, sharp and hungry. "Only about you." That night, Ava lay awake in her chamber, the words echoing through her head. Only about you. Her fury should have been enough to drown them out. But instead, the sound of them lingered, curling like smoke in the hollow of her chest. And for the first time, she began to wonder if Dominic's madness was the very thing keeping her alive. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold leaf, violins swelling above the murmur of voices. Politicians, businessmen, and criminals disguised in tuxedos mingled beneath the painted ceilings of the Hudson estate, as if blood weren't the currency binding them all. At Dominic's side, Ava walked in silk the color of midnight. Her hair had been styled into a crown, her lips painted to perfection, but her eyes still betrayed the storm inside her. Every head turned when they entered. Some stares carried envy, others hunger. Whispers chased them across the polished floor. Santoro's bride, the lost heart daughter, the girl no one was supposed to find. Ava's chin lifted higher, even as her heart hammered. Dominic's hand pressed against the small of her back, firm, reminding, possession disguised as protection. Then Luca Morelli appeared. He cut through the crowd with a smile sharp as glass, his suit perfectly tailored, his gaze locked on Ava, even as he bowed shallowly to Dominic. "Mr. Santoro," he drawled, before turning his charm fully on her. "And Senora Santoro, you look exquisite this evening." Before Dominic could refuse, Luca extended his hand. "May I?" Ava froze. Every instinct screamed to step back, to shake her head, but eyes were everywhere, watching, whispering. If she refused, it would confirm weakness. If she accepted, it would invite war. For one dizzy second, she thought of the cage she lived in, of Dominic's words. "Then hate me, but stay." And perhaps because of that, or perhaps because rebellion was the only weapon left to her, she placed her hand in Luca's. Gasps rippled. Luca led her onto the floor, guiding her with confident ease. The violins swelled, couples parting to make room. "You move well," he said softly, his voice pitched for her alone, even in chains. Her jaw clenched. "This isn't freedom, Luca. Don't mistake it." His smile deepened. "It could be. With me, you wouldn't be caged. You'd be worshipped." "Worshipped?" she spat. "Like a trophy? Like bait to break Dominic?" He leaned closer, his breath grazing her ear. "Better a trophy than a prisoner." Her chest tightened. She hated him for speaking the truth she had feared, but she hated herself more for even listening. Around them, the room buzzed with speculation. Every step of their dance was a rumor born. Dominic watched from the edge of the crowd, his face carved from stone, but fury smoldered in his eyes. He let it last only long enough for every whisper to reach its peak. Then he moved. The crowd parted instinctively as he crossed the floor. He didn't ask. He didn't speak. He seized Ava's hand, tearing her from Luca's grip, and in the same breath pulled her against him. And then his mouth crashed onto hers, hard, merciless, possessive. Gasps tore through the ballroom. Whispers sharpened like knives. But all Ava felt was fire, his lips crushing hers, his hand holding her steady when her knees threatened to give. She resisted for a heartbeat, her lips stiff with fury, and then, God help her, she yielded. Her body betrayed her, leaning into him, answering fire with fire. When he finally pulled back, her lips were swollen, her cheeks flushed crimson, her eyes blazing with hatred and confusion. Dominic turned his gaze to Luca, his thumb still brushing Ava's jaw in silent claim. "Touch my wife again," he said coldly, loud enough for half the room to hear. "And you'll dance with bullets, not music." Luca's smile slipped, replaced by a narrowed gaze. But he inclined his head, mockery dripping from the gesture. "Of course, forgive my enthusiasm." The violins resumed as though nothing had happened, but the air crackled with tension. Every guest knew they had witnessed a war disguised as a waltz. Dominic didn't release Ava until they were beyond the ballroom, the doors slamming shut behind them. His grip tightened, spinning her to face him in the shadowed corridor. His eyes blazed, colder than ice, hotter than fire. "Do not look at him again." Ava shoved at his chest, fury breaking free. "I didn't do anything. He was polite. That's all. Polite? Dominic hissed. He put his mouth on your hand. He led you across that floor like you were his. He'll not do it again. Her pulse thundered. His possessiveness should have terrified her. Maybe it did. But it also sent something hot and reckless racing through her veins. You don't own me. His hand caught the back of her neck, pulling her close until their foreheads nearly touched. His voice was rough, ragged. No, but I will. And men like Luca will choke on the proof. Her lips trembled, half in fury, half in something she didn't dare name. You're insane. His smirk was sharp, feral. Only about you. That night, Ava lay awake in her chamber, heart still pounding from the fire of his kiss. She pressed her fingers to her lips, hating herself for remembering the taste, for craving what she swore she despised. I will not break, she whispered to the empty room. But deep inside, she already knew she had. The night after the ballroom felt heavier than war. The estate was quiet, though the city beyond buzzed with rumors. Whispers of Santoro's public claim, of Morelli's humiliation, of a bride who looked torn between crown and cage. Ava sat alone in her chamber, silk pooling around her, staring at the moonlight spilling across the balcony. Her lips still tingled from Dominic's kiss. She pressed trembling fingers to her mouth, hating herself for remembering, hating herself more for craving it. She told herself it was only survival. That fire against fire was instinct. But deep down, a truth she refused to name clawed at her. I can't keep living like this. She didn't realize her feet had carried her down the corridor until she stood before his chamber door. Her hand hovered at the handle, trembling, but she pushed it open. Dominic stood at the window, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled, the skyline of New York glowing behind him. For once he didn't look like a kingpin. He looked like a man unraveling. When he turned and saw her, something softened instantly in his gaze. Ava, he said, her name no longer a command but a prayer. She closed the door behind her, pressing her back against it as though sealing them into their own world. I can't keep fighting like this, she whispered. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. I can't breathe with this war between us. Dominic set his glass aside, crossing the room slowly, as though afraid she might vanish. Tell me what you want, he murmured, his voice rough, and I'll give it to you. Anything. Her chest ached, the truth clawing up her throat. I want to stop pretending I don't feel this. His breath caught, sharp and audible. In the next heartbeat he was in front of her. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Say it again, he demanded softly, desperately. Say it, Ava. Her eyes locked on his, no longer hiding. I want you. His mouth claimed hers, not with the violence of possession, but with the urgency of a man starving. Her hands tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer, needing him as much as he needed her. The kiss consumed, devoured, healed. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her to the bed without breaking the kiss. The world outside, enemies, lies, betrayals, ceased to exist. There was only them. For the first time, she didn't resist. She chose. When his lips trailed to her throat, when his hands traced her skin with reverence and hunger, Ava whispered the words that sealed it. Yours. His body shuddered, his voice breaking against her skin. Mine. Always mine. The night blurred into fire, into a bond deeper than forged vows or stolen signatures. By the time dawn touched the windows, she was curled against him, his arms around her as if he would never let her go. And for the first time, she didn't want him to. Weeks later, the roses in the gardens were heavy with bloom when Ava pressed a hand to her stomach. Her breath caught, tears stinging her eyes as the truth pulsed through her again. She had suspected. Now she knew. She was pregnant. For a moment, fear washed over her. How could she raise a child in this world of blood and power? How could she love something so innocent when everything around her was stained? But then she remembered the night Dominic had lowered his blade at her word. The night he had said, I fear nothing in this world except losing you. And she knew. He would protect this child with the same ferocity he protected her. When she told him, he sank to his knees before her, trembling hands pressing against her waist, his forehead resting against her stomach. A child, he whispered, reverent and raw. Our child. For once, Dominic Santoro looked undone. Not by enemies, not by war, but by hope. I swear, Ava, he said, voice breaking, I will protect you both with everything I am, with every drop of blood in my body. Her fingers slid into his hair, her smile trembling but steady. I don't need you to be invincible, Dominic. I just need you to be here. With us. That night, as the city lights burned beyond the windows, Ava lay in Dominic's arms, his lips pressed to her hair, their futures bound by something stronger than fear. Not forged signatures, not stolen vows, but by fire, surrender, and the promise of new life. For the first time, neither of them wanted to run. The seasons had shifted by the time the estate's gardens bloomed again. Summer had melted into autumn, the air crisp, the trees beyond the Hudson glowing in shades of amber and gold. For the first time since stepping into this world, Ava walked the grounds without feeling like a prisoner. The guards were still there, discreet shadows at the edge of her vision, but they no longer felt like bars. They felt like walls built to keep threats out, not keep her in. She paused beneath an old oak, her hand resting gently on the curve of her stomach. Life fluttered within her, soft and insistent, a reminder that everything had changed. She smiled, the expression small but real. The girl who once worked double shifts in diners, invisible to the world, now carried the heir to one of the most feared families in America. And yet, she didn't feel like a pawn anymore. She felt like the beginning of something new. From the terrace, Dominic watched her. For years, he had measured victories in territory, in fear, in silence bought with blood. But now, he found himself measuring in moments. In the way Ava's laugh reached him across the garden, in the way her hand curved instinctively around their child. When she turned and caught his gaze, he felt that same sharp ache he had known the first time she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder, as though she had been given to him by mistake. A gift he had stolen, and he would spend the rest of his life fighting to deserve it. He descended the steps, crossing the lawn with the steady stride of a man feared by enemies but softened by love he could no longer deny. You're watching me again, Ava teased as he reached her, her smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Always, he admitted simply, his hand sliding to rest over hers on her stomach. I can't stop. She rolled her eyes, but her voice was gentle. You don't have to hold me so tightly anymore, Dominic. I'm not running. His gaze darkened, though not with the old hunger for control. It was reverence, awe. I know, but I'll never stop holding on. They stood there as the leaves drifted down around them, the empire quiet for once, the war silenced by fragile peace. Ava leaned into him, letting his arm anchor her. For the first time, she didn't feel caged. She felt chosen. And Dominic, the man who once claimed her through lies and fire, now whispered the only vow that mattered. Whatever comes, Ava, you and our child will always be my world. I'll burn everything else before I let anyone take you from me. She looked up at him, her eyes steady, her heart no longer torn between hate and surrender. I don't need the world, Dominic, she said softly. I just need you. His lips brushed hers, not fierce, not desperate, but certain. A kiss of promise, of forever. The wind stirred the last of the autumn leaves, carrying them across the estate. And for once, Ava didn't wonder what freedom might feel like beyond the gates. Because freedom was here, in his arms, in the life growing inside her, in the future they would build together. A different kind of future. One born not of lies, but of love. And that's the end of part 1 of this story. If you enjoyed it, please support me by leaving a like. And if you want to hear part 2, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Tell me from which corner of the world you're listening. I love it when you interact in the comments. Thank you for spending your time with us. God bless you, and see you soon.